लेट मी गिव यू सम एनोक्डोट्स, है ना, जितने भी टॉपर्स हैं अभी, दोज वर एबल टू गेट रैंक इन टॉप 100, they were having various problems. Okay, like rank 72, she is Muskan. 77 rank has come from नाम भूल गया इनका, सुनील. 99 rank is of Ankit. These three are very close to me. Okay, Muskan was able to get a rank last year also, and this year she has improved it. Hardly 65 marks in paper 2 last year. There was some problem. UPSC gave very less marks in paper 2. Sunil, this was his 4th attempt. Last year he failed in mains. He also had 65 marks in paper 2. Ankit was not having the success in the exam so far. Last year he was able to eventually clear in UPPCS, and now this year he has got into Indian Foreign Service. तो देखो टॉप 100 रैंक अगर लाना है तो इट्स नॉट लाइक यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू हैव प्रॉब्लम्स. ठीक है, लाइक सुनील इज द क्लोजेस्ट टू मी, बीन विद मी फ्रॉम लास्ट 3 years. 2021 से मेरे साथ है कि सर पास करा दो किसी तरीके से. आई डू नॉट नो व्हाट टू डू, व्हाट नॉट टू डू. So the important thing is perseverance. ठीक है, plus right guidance. Whatever I'm telling you in the classes, if you're going to follow them, result आ जाएगा. आप सोचो ना, ये टॉपर्स के मार्क्स कितने आ रहे हैं? 65 आने चाहिए क्या टॉपर्स के मार्क्स? अभी तो हमें मार्क्स पता चलेंगे. दिस ईयर्स रिजल्ट, है ना, यूपीएससी उसको देगा अभी. बट हाउ डज ऑल दीज पीपल आर फ्रॉम आवर इंस्टीट्यूट? कैसे आ रहे हैं ये? कुछ तो मेथोडोलॉजी है, राइट? आई वॉज एबल टू डू सो. मेरे मार्क्स भी अच्छे खासे आए थे. एंड समहाउ these people have also scored at least 280, 290 or 300 marks. That's why they are in the top 100. Okay, so improvement is going to happen. All the online students, improvement is going to happen. But आप शुरुआत से ही अच्छे से पढ़ना शुरू करो. Whatever we are discussing in the concept classes, let me be very frank with you. जो आपके आंसर राइटिंग की प्रॉब्लम थी ना कल, we were discussing same kind of problems were with them also. It's not like the toppers come out of vacuum. No, they keep on working on these things, and once they are able to do so, automatically pass हो जाओगे. ठीक है? So we have differential examples. Muskan was able to get it in the first attempt itself. This year she was able to improve her rank. Sunil not able to give one interview so far. 3 attempts. 3 attempts he was not able to clear. This year he was with me. I was able to guide him for essay also, general studies also. Optional तो पूरा ही मेरे साथ किया है इसने. Rank 77, 4th attempt, first interview. अब काम खत्म हो गया. He was अभी कॉल ही था उनका. That's why मैं थोड़ा सा 2-3 मिनट लेट हो गया. He said कि तपस्या सर खत्म हो गई, अब आज पार्टी करते हैं. ठीक है, मैंने कहा पार्टी वार्टी कर लेना, बट कम टू द क्लासेस, है ना. अब जैसे हमारी जो कोर क्लासेस होंगी तो इन्हीं टॉपर्स को बुला के पहले सेशन करेंगे. आप लोगों को इनके जो सक्सेस स्टोरी हैं वो तो हर कोई बताएगा. इनकी जो फेलियर स्टोरीज हैं फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग एंड हाउ दे एंडेड अप रीचिंग हियर, वो आपको नोट डाउन करना है. मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, बिफोर बिकमिंग अ टॉपर एवरीबडी इज लाइक यू. इट्स नॉट लाइक दैट दीज टॉपर्स आर इवेंचुअली गोइंग टू कम फ्रॉम समवेयर एल्स. नो, इट्स गोइंग टू कम फ्रॉम वेरियस इंस्टीट्यूट्स, प्लस द हार्ड वर्क विच इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर डूइंग सो. तो ये सारे लोग जो अभी पास हुए हैं, इनकी हम आपको आंसर कॉपीज देंगे. ठीक है, हमारी टेस्ट सीरीज में जिन्होंने आंसर्स लिखे हुए हैं वो आंसर्स कॉपीज हम आज इनका रिलीज करना स्टार्ट करेंगे. आप सब लोग भी हु आर कंप्लीट बिगिनर्स, आप उनको देखेंगे. इज इट क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू? बिकॉज दिस इज द गोल. इफ यूपीएससी इज रिवार्डिंग अ सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ आंसर राइटिंग स्टाइल इन आवर ऑप्शनल, तो आप उसको अभी से अपनाना शुरू करेंगे. See the diversity of answer writing of these toppers. मैंने इन लोगों को एक एक आंसर ठीक कराया है इनका. When they used to write answers, डरते थे मुझसे आने मिलने से पहले कि सर अब डांटेंगे कि क्या गलतियां करी है मैंने. तो जैसे कल आपको मैंने फर्स्ट स्टेप बताया ना आंसर राइटिंग के लिए, प्लीज डोंट शाई अवे फ्रॉम हार्ड वर्किंग, है ना, जितना ज़्यादा हार्ड वर्क करोगे उतना अच्छा आंसर राइटिंग होगा, और लास्ट में ये रैंक सारी प्योरली आंसर राइटिंग प्लस मेंटरशिप एट द टाइम ऑफ इंटरव्यू उससे आने वाला है। तो आज मैं 5 मिनट आपको बस यही बात करने वाला था भाई, रिजल्ट आ जाएगा, बट आर यू रेडी फॉर दैट? इफ यू आर नॉट रेडी फॉर दैट तो नहीं आएगा। तो इसलिए नीचे झुक के मत बोला करो जब मैं बोलता हूं कि रैंक आनी चाहिए कि नहीं आनी चाहिए। यहां पे जब तक जिगरा नहीं आएगा ना, आई विल बी एबल टू डू इट, कंप्लीट 100% faith, then it will get reflect in your hard work, और वो हार्ड वर्क आपका रिजल्ट लेके आएगा। So be very precise from the beginning. The first 6 months of the preparation is the best time, और वही आपको बता सकता है आप पास होने वाले हो या नहीं होने वाले हो। और मैं चाहता हूँ ऑल ऑफ यू गेट सेलेक्टेड। देखो ये हम कभी डिसाइड नहीं कर सकते कि फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट में होगे, सेकंड में होगे, थर्ड में होगे, है ना। Like she was able to do in the first attempt, improved in the second itself. Her journey is over. Now she is going to be relatively free in her life. Here, Sunil was not having any backup, no plan B. State PCS भी नहीं दिया इसने. He is from Haryana. In fact, all three are from Haryana. Okay, so he was telling me, sir, मेरे को स्टेट वाले में नहीं जाना है। मैंने कहा यार चल अगले साल देखना, अभी पहले अच्छे से इंटरव्यू वगैरह दो, जरूरत ही नहीं। सेम थिंग हैपेंड विद मी व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड प्रिपेयरिंग। पीपल यूज्ड टू से कि यार प्लान भी बना लो, स्टेट पीसीएस देना शुरू कर दो फर्स्ट ईयर से। उससे प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है ना, यूपीएससी की प्रिपरेशन व्हेन इट इज नॉट कंप्लीट, थिंग्स स्टार्ट्स गेटिंग मिक्स अप, एंड आप फिर उसके पीछे चले जाते हो, ए बी सी डी पूरा साल निकल जाता है उसी चीज में। तो इनिशियल 2 to 3 अटेम्प्ट्स, आई टेल ऑल ऑफ यू, प्लीज डेडिकेट कंप्लीटली टू यूपीएससी। सो फायदा क्या होगा, एक ही बारी में निकल जाएगा। I was never able to give state PCS of my state because एक तो 3-4 साल में एक बार होता है, और जब तक वो हुआ तब तक तो हम पास हो गए, अब फिर क्यों दें। ऑलराइट, वहां पे कभी रिजल्ट का भी पक्का नहीं रहता है, कब आएगा कब नहीं आएगा, पता नहीं कौन से ईयर के प्रीलिम्स का रिजल्ट अब आएगा मेंस में, है ना। उसको जान लेना, वो अटेम्प्ट दे लो उसको, बट डोंट फोकस ऑन दैट। एज ऑल ऑफ यू नो, उनके लिए तो एज 40 तक जाता है ना। समटाइम्स you and your children they can also give state PCS together, ना। अब तो इंडिया ने एज बढ़ा दिया, मैरिजेबल एज, बट दिस यूज्ड टू हैपन। हाँ 42 ईयर्स में दे रहे, साथ में बच्चा 21 ईयर्स, दोनों साथ में लिख रहे, मीन्स ठीक हुआ ना। हाँ हुआ। हाँ तो वो प्रॉब्लम रहता है, बट हेयर इट वाज आई एम टेलिंग यू, ऑल दीज टॉपर्स आर गोइंग टू कम इन द क्लासेस, आपको समझाएंगे क्या करना है नहीं करना है। प्लस आई एम ऑलवेज विद यू, मेरा सबसे ज्यादा मेन फोकस रहता है, स्ट्रेटजी शुड बी वेरी साउंड फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग, एंड इफ इट इज साउंड फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग, आपका जो अननेसेसरी स्ट्रगल है ना, दैट शुड बी रिड्यूस्ड। इफ दैट इज नॉट रिड्यूस्ड, यार फिर हम परेशान ही होते रहेंगे। और एक चीज पहले से ही समझ लो, ऑल ऑफ देम हैव इम्प्रूव्ड, है ना। सुनील का एटलीस्ट 140 to 145 मार्क्स आएगा, ये आप मुझसे लिखवा लो। तो इतना 80 नंबर कैसे इंक्रीज होता है? इट्स थ्रू हार्ड वर्क। कुछ तो गलती कर रहे थे। आई ऑल्सो नो ओनली द लास्ट ईयर मार्क्स, इस ईयर के मार्क्स तो हम किसी को पता नहीं चलेगा, अभी यू हैव टू वेट फॉर 10 to 12 days, तब इनका सबका मार्कशीट आ जाएगा। देन विल बी एबल टू बेटर एनालाइज किसने किस सब्जेक्ट में कैसा परफॉर्म किया। बट ऑल ऑफ यू शुड रिमेंबर, अच्छे से हार्ड वर्क करो, ठीक है। ऑल ऑफ यू वांट टू गेट सेलेक्टेड, इज दैट क्लियर? यू वांट टू गेट सेलेक्टेड ना भाई, अपने अंदर को बताओ, समझाओ। आई एम नॉट हेयर कि पापा ने बोला है, मूवी देख लिया, मॉम टोल्ड मी, नो, यू वांट टू क्लियर दिस एग्जाम, दिस इज द डिफाइनिंग स्टेटमेंट। व्हेन दिस इज वेरी क्लियर, देन ओनली यू कैन वर्क वेरी हार्ड, देन यू विल ट्राई टू फाइंड आउट कौन सा स्किल आपको डेवलप करना है। और जो भी चीजें मैं आपको करा रहा हूं, दे विल टेक यू हियर। रैंक कोई प्रोडिक्ट नहीं कर सकता, लास्ट में रैंक 1 आया, रैंक 100 आया, नोबडी नोज। लास्ट ईयर द टॉपर रैंक 1 फ्रॉम आवर इंस्टीट्यूट, शी वाज आल्सो फ्रॉम हिस्ट्री ऑप्शनल। कौन सा रैंक आएगा वी कैन नेवर प्रोडिक्ट, बट द ओनली थिंग वी कैन डू कि हम रिजल्ट प्रोड्यूस करेंगे, बिकॉज एवरी ऑप्शनल इज गोइंग टू हैव टॉपर्स। दिस इज द फिलॉसफी ऑफ यूपीएससी, राइट। तो वो रिजल्ट तो हर साल आने वाला है और अच्छा रिजल्ट आएगा। आप बस ये देखिए आप उसमें होंगे या नहीं होंगे, है ना। लाइक वी स्टार्टिंग दिस जर्नी, आप लोगों के लिए थोड़ा सा भी लंबा जर्नी है. यू विल गिव प्रीलिम्स इन नेक्स्ट ईयर 24, तो आपका रिजल्ट कब आएगा? 25 में. तो 2 साल तो मिनिमम एफर्ट डालना पड़ेगा ना. बिना 2 साल की मेहनत के तो काम नहीं चलेगा. मिनिमम 2 years you have to do. When somebody says, no, it is my first attempt, that does not mean that they have worked for 1 year. 1 year is the cycle of the exam. Prelims, mains, personality test. This is the cycle of the exam. And 1 year before that, at least you have to start. Right? So from now till the result of 2024, which will come in 25, next 2 years, all of you please give your everything to the exam. Learn all the skills. We'll be starting with general studies also, various programs which will help you in excelling in those aspects also. जितना अच्छा स्ट्रेटजी रहेगा, जितना अच्छा आपका लेवल रहेगा, रैंक ऑटोमेटिकली आ जाएगा. आप सबने सुना होगा ना, सक्सेस कैन बी डिलेड बट इट कैन नॉट बी डिनाइड. डिले हो गया, सुनील के लिए डिले हो गया यार, मेरे को आके बोल रहा था सर 3 साल हो गए मेरे को, क्या करूं मैं. It generates. When you become 27, 28 years old, everybody starts asking questions to you. कि भाई क्या कर रहे हो. अभी all of you are 22, 23, 24. यहाँ तक क्वेश्चन नहीं आते. लाइफ में क्वेश्चन स्टार्ट होते हैं from 27. कि what are you doing in your life? So it starts by third attempt. Everybody will ask you, but you have to stay focused. I also cleared in third attempt. In second attempt I gave interview. In first I was not able to clear mains. कुछ मार्क्स से रह गया था, बट वो हो गया ना, सर्कल कंप्लीट हो गया, तो कभी रिग्रेट ही नहीं होगा लाइफ में. तो आपको उस तरीके से होराइजन से देखना है अपनी प्रिपरेशन को. सो डोंट वेस्ट एनी टाइम. ऑलराइट, सो ऑल द ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स, आई होप ऑल ऑफ यू वर एबल टू सी. सारी कॉपीज आप सब लोगों के साथ शेयर होंगी. सी इट फ्रॉम द दीज कॉपीज ऑल्सो. आपकी कॉपीज शेयर होना स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे आज से. इनकी काफी सारी कॉपीज है हमारे पास. लाइक यू हैव टू सी कॉपीज ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया, मिडिएवल, मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड. कल मैंने आपको एक चीज बोला था, एंड दैट वाज दैट आंसर राइटिंग ऑफ एवरी सेक्शन इज अ बिट डिफरेंट. बोला था ना मैंने आपको ये चीज. ये कैसे पता चलेगा? टॉपर्स की कॉपी देखना, क्योंकि इन लोगों को हमने रिफाइन किया है. मुस्कान के साथ मैंने कम से कम 3 से 4 1-to-1 किए थे मेन से पहले. आई टोल्ड हर क्या क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हैं उनके आंसर्स में. शी इम्प्रूव्ड इट. Can be seen in the result. Sunil was not able to get very marks in paper 2. मैंने बोला यार सुनील आराम से बैठो. There was one more my previous student, Amit Chaturvedi. Amit Chaturvedi gave first attempt in 2018. Got very poor marks in paper 2. तो उसने मेरे को बोला सर ऑप्शनल चेंज कर लें क्या. This is also going to happen. याद रखना, जब भी किसी ऑप्शनल में अगर एक बार रिजल्ट नहीं आता है तो वो चेंज होने. जैसे कल मेरे पास एक स्टूडेंट आया था, सर आई वाज नॉट एबल टू गेट रिजल्ट विद मेडिकल साइंस, तो मैं हिस्ट्री में चेंज कर लेता हूँ. दिस इज गोइंग टू हैपन व्हेन यू डोंट गेट रिजल्ट. सो आई टोल्ड अमित प्लीज ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ टू गेट मार्क्स फर्स्ट. ठीक है, वर्कड हार्ड होल ईयर. 2019 165 मार्क्स इन पेपर 2. इससे भी 9 नंबर ज्यादा है. एंड आई वाज वेरी हैप्पी. फिर वो मेरे पास आया मिठाई लेके, सर अच्छा वो आपकी सुन ली. नहीं तो ऑप्शनल ही बदलते रह जाते. आप समझो ना यार, किसी भी एक ऑप्शनल को अच्छे से तैयार करने में कम से कम 6 से 8 महीना तो मिनिमम लगेगा. एंड इफ यू आर चेंजिंग इट्स लाइक दिस कि आज ये कर लें आज वो कर लें, तो वो तो रहे नहीं, वो तो होगा नहीं. एक बार एक ऑप्शन समझ लिया, अच्छा लग रहा है, इंटरेस्ट है, रिजल्ट आ रहा है उसमें, टेक इट एंड गो फार. डोंट स्टॉप इन बिटवीन. तो ये सारे लोग किसी न किसी लेवल पे यार बिलीफ दिखाना पड़ता है अपने ऑप्शनल में, अपने अंदर. हर चीज में एफर्ट डालोगे, रिजल्ट इज गोइंग टू कम. Today's 15 minutes I wanted to spend on these things because whatever we are doing eventually is for these things. रैंक आ जाएगी. अब तो आज तो पूरा दिन YouTube चलेगा आपका विद इंटरव्यूज. मैंने ये किया, मैंने वो किया, है ना. टीवीज पे सारा शुरू हो जाता है. एंड दोज पीपल हु आर फ्रॉम रूरल एरियाज, उनका और ज़्यादा लाइमलाइट में आता है. फिर मैंने टॉपर्स विल से मैंने तो कभी कोचिंग किया ही नहीं. फिर वो हमें मैसेज करेंगे सॉरी सर. अगर आप बोलोगे आपने कोचिंग किया तो कौन न्यूज़पेपर वाला छापेगा, उसको तो हेडलाइन बनाना है ना. हेडलाइन कैसे बनेगा जब आप बोलोगे कि कोचिंग नहीं किया, इनफैक्ट कोचिंग वालों को हम पढ़ाते थे। Anyway, so be aware of these things. Some things are just for marketing and some things are real. ठीक है, वो रियलिटी को समझो। रियलिटी हम आपको कॉपीज वगैरह शेयर करेंगे, उनको देखते रहना। टाइम टू टाइम कोई भी प्रॉब्लम आती है, देखो यू एंड मी आर गोइंग टू डेवलप अ रिलेशनशिप एंड दिस रिलेशनशिप विल बी बेस्ड अपॉन सर्टेन वैल्यूज। ठीक है, वो वैल्यूज क्या होंगी? आई एम गोइंग टू गिव माई बेस्ट, इफ यूल वर्क हार्ड देन ओनली यूल हैव द काइंड ऑफ यू कैन से पावर टू कम टू मी। नहीं तो आप क्या करोगे, आप खुद डरने लग जाओगे कि मैं वहां जाके द लेवल ऑफ क्वेश्चन दैट यू हैव आई विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड आप कितना एफर्ट डाल रहे हो। अगर आप कुछ नहीं पढ़ाई करोगे तो सबसे पहले सर आंसर राइटिंग नहीं हो पा रहा है, दिस विल बी योर फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन। इफ यू आर ऑलरेडी डूइंग आंसर राइटिंग, द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन वुड बी सर इंट्रोडक्शन में कुछ दिक्कत आ रहा है मेरे को। ठीक है, इफ यू रिटन ओनली 1 or 2 क्वेश्चंस तो आप बोलोगे सर बाकी सब तो ठीक है, मेरे को समझ में आ जाएगा। नहीं 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 नहीं, पढ़ के नहीं आया, अभी तक इसने लिखा ही नहीं है। कम से कम 100 आंसर लोगे तब समझ में आएगा कि इन एवरी क्वेश्चन वी हैव डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ स्ट्रगल। देन यू से सर क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन और एग्जामिन में डिफरेंस क्या है, दिस इज अ हायर लेवल क्वेश्चन। देन सर आंसर राइटिंग कैसे करते हैं? सो वट एवर यू आस्क मी आई कैन इजिली टेल वट यू आर डूइंग। सो इफ यू वांट टू गेट दैट एक्सेस, if you want my attention, first you have to create curiosity that you are working hard. So it depends upon that. All these people had complete access to me, they have my personal number also, but you will only get it if you work hard, because then I'll always be ready कि ठीक है यार एफर्ट डाल देते हैं, मेरा तो 5 मिनट जाएगा, इनका करियर बन जाएगा। मेरे दिमाग में हमेशा यही चलता है, तो मैं ज़्यादा टाइम का सोचता नहीं हूँ। ठीक है, आई ट्राई माई लेवल बेस्ट कि यार आप सब लोगों के साथ बात करता रहूँ। कोई आपको साइकोलॉजिकल प्रॉब्लम डेवलप हो उससे पहले मुझसे बात करोगे तो ज़्यादा शांत होकर अच्छा परफॉर्म कर पाओगे। दैट्स हाउ इट इज़, बट यू हैव टू अर्न इट, एंड अर्निंग इट रिक्वायर्स, ये नहीं कि सर मैं तो बहुत मेहनत कर रहा हूँ। नहीं नहीं नहीं, बोलने में नहीं, दिखाओ, शो मी इन एक्शंस, राइट आंसर्स, कम टू मी आफ्टर क्लासेस और कम टू मी, हैव 1-to-1 सेशन, बट देन यूटिलाइज इट। एवरी ईयर पता नहीं कितने 1-to-1 सेशंस में लेता हूँ, मुझे भी पता है कि वहां पे आउटपुट आएगा, कहाँ नहीं आएगा। आई कैन बेट कि यहाँ यहाँ आएगा, यहाँ नहीं आएगा, और आपको वो बनने की कोशिश करना है। अदरवाइज यू योरसेल्फ विल अवॉइड कमिंग टू मी कि बस ठीक है क्लास हो गया, रन, चाय चाहिए। ठीक है, एफर्ट डालना शुरू करो, और जो भी चीजें मैं सिखा रहा हूँ पर डे, थिंक ऑफ इट एज ए होमवर्क। Okay. So Sanjay, if you're able to understand all my classes, तो ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम आपको नहीं आने वाला। Only notes they will be in English. Okay, so don't worry about it. Yes, Salman, you'll be able to see those copies. They will be mostly shared on the Telegram platform. ठीक है, तो वो आपको मिल जाएगी। तो आज से आप उनको फॉलो करना स्टार्ट करना। कैसी कॉपीज हैं, हम यहाँ पे कुछ आपके प्रिंटेड कॉपीज भी रख देंगे, तो आप उसको भी एक बार गो थ्रू करो। बिकॉज देखो इन सब की रैंक फाइनली इट कम्स फ्रॉम मेंस, इट डजंट कम फ्रॉम प्रीलिम्स, है ना। मेंस से ही आता है, प्रीलिम्स में तो सिर्फ आपको कट ऑफ क्लियर करना है, एंड वंस यू आर एबल टू डू सो इट्स प्योरली मेंस। ऑलराइट, yesterday we were discussing modern India. I hope the meaning of the modern India is clear to all of you. I gave you various examples, okay, in terms of changes in the political structure. Like we started shifting towards rule of law, we started shifting towards separation of powers, all those things that you study in your polity, India's constitution, that is what modern polity. Similarly, when we talk about society, we see that eradication of slavery, focus on equality, more principles which can lead to progress of society, tolerance, all these values are going to be part of modern India. Civilized that we talk about. When we talk about economy, we see the beginning of industrial revolution, shift from hand-based production to machine-based production. Even in terms of religion now going to become a private affair. We see secularization of the state. Even in terms of science and technology, we see more progress. The kind of artificial intelligence that we are seeing, है ना, देख रहे हो ना, Chat GPT, etc., etc. Google is coming up with Bard. What was the foundation of this science and technology? It starts from the era of Enlightenment, 17th, 18th century. So this is what modern is. Then we had taken a brief overview of the various European companies. I hope all of you remember the four important powers, starting with Portuguese. After Portuguese, we see the arrival of Dutch. Then we had the most important English. For facts purpose, you can also remember after that came the Danish, even though they were mostly focusing on the religious affair, conversions. Okay, so their political role was next to nothing. That's why even in the books they are ignored. Okay, and the last one to arrive were French. One key fact which you can remember: Portuguese were the first to come and last to leave. Okay, they were the one who eventually gave it to us, Daman, Diu, Goa, and that too after police action in 1961. सबसे जिद्दी लोग हैं, ठीक है? French handed over its territory of Pondicherry in 1954 by their own will. कि आप रख लो, हम अब इंडिया में नहीं रहना चाहते. बहुत हुआ. Alright, British, as all of you know, 1947 there were transfer of power itself, and Dutch had already lost. But as we have discussed, the Dutch started its focusing on Indonesia. Okay, so this is the broad overview of these European companies which we have discussed in detail yesterday. After this, we discussed the issue of 18th century. In 18th century, we discussed about the transformation of Indian polity, and in transformation, we discussed that after 1707, we see decentralization of power. I have often repeated this. There were three categories of states, okay, which included the successor states like Hyderabad, Bengal, and Awadh. Second category of state were rebellious like the Jats and the Marathas, and the third category was that of the independent states like Travancore, even some of the Rajput principalities. So India's polity was now into a transformative phase. At the same time, we see the beginning of large-scale invasions which were going to affect the major powers. Like 1739, we see it led to the complete downfall of the Mughal army. It was from whom? Nadir Shah. In 1761, Ahmad Shah Abdali was able to defeat the Marathas effectively. So that's how on one way we see transformation of polity, and second, even in terms of military, now India was not superior to the outsiders. Because of these factors, the room was now increasing for British, which was able to defeat French. We discussed in three Carnatic wars, British were able to emerge as victorious, and by the same time, we had seen the decline of the major powers of India. So starting from 1757, they were able to get control over Bengal. This control was then turned into complete dominance by 1764, okay, in the famous Battle of Buxar. Then we had discussed yesterday that from 1765 till 1772, they preferred a kind of government which is known as dual rule or dual government, in which the face remained the Nawab of Bengal, but the control was in the hand of the British. Revenue through the Diwani rights given to them as per the Allahabad Treaty of 1765, plus the Nizamat was given by the Nawab itself, under which we had discussed that the deputy Subedar or the deputy Nab, it was under the complete control of the company. Eventually, this was scrapped in 1773, and we see that Warren Hastings came to India, and the Regulating Act was passed. Yesterday we also discussed that when it comes to administration, now British found themselves in power and they wanted to increase their footprint in India. And in order to increase that footprint, they had to go for the policy of expansion, and that expansion was going to happen, right? And in this expansion, we discussed that they fought with Mysore. How many wars did they fought? 4 wars, right? The first major leader was Hyder Ali, and then his son was Tipu Sultan. So Mysore was annexed by 1799. We had discussed that 3 wars were fought with the Marathas, and by 1818 even the Marathas, they were completely under the control of the British. Then we see the major state was Punjab, and Punjab was also annexed by 1848. It was also annexed, and the last major state which had already signed the Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance earlier was now annexed in 1856. Okay, so this is how British were able to expand. We are only discussing the major ones which are important from exam point of view. Other than this, there were various smaller states. Okay, like when Lord Dalhousie from 1848 to 1856, we see the reign of Lord Dalhousie, and he was considered as one of the biggest experimenter in the realm of imperialism. All of you know about the doctrine of lapse. This was one of the principles on which he was able to annex various smaller states, which includes like Jhansi, Nagpur, Jaitapur, Satara. Various these states were annexed by him. So various methods were used for expansion. For these major states, it was only through the method of war. Only for Awadh, he used the pretext of misgovernance. Okay, as Awadh had already signed a Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance, only misgovernance was used and it was directly annexed. We had also discussed about Sindh, but it was relatively less important in comparison to these major states. This is the expansion. Similarly, they tried to create administration. For administration, we had various acts, as we have already discussed. From 1773, the major act was the Act of 1784, which again created a kind of dual system of government. Okay, we had the court of directors which used to take care of the affairs of the company, but under the direction of the board of control, which used to be in England and accountable to the parliament, right? So this, from this till 1853, there were nominal changes. In 1833, it was made a purely administrative body. All its commercial rights were taken away. We had already discussed about it. Similarly, along with this, they tried to create civil services, police, tried to stabilize their revenue streams by coming up with various land revenue settlements. Okay, various land revenue settlements, starting with permanent settlement in 1793, then comes the Rayatwari settlement in 1820, and finally the Mahalwari settlement. Okay, so these are the various things which they tried to do. We also discussed one more concept yesterday, that the majority of the torture of this British administration, the impact was going to be on villages, because they were the one who were paying the revenue. They were the one who were facing the brunt of the British imperialism. All right. So because of this, various peasant uprisings happened. That includes like Rangpur Dhing of 1783. The famous includes like Indigo Rebellion, even later on we see like Deccan riots or Deccan uprising. These are the famous ones. Okay, similarly the tribals, they were also affected. The manner in which the British were able to affect their local structure. So tribals includes famous Cole Rebellion, Santhal Rebellion, Munda Rebellion. We'll discuss in detail about them later on. This is just a brief overview of how the impact was there. But if we see the positive impact on urban areas, this led to the beginning of socio-religious reform movements. These reform movements were of basically two types. Some of them took the guidance from the outside, okay, from Europe, the kind of reforms. So those came to known as reformist those who tried to take inspiration from Indian civilization itself, those came to known as revivalists. Like in revivalists, we have Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who said go back to Vedas, trying to find out inspiration within India's civilizational values. In reformists, you can have like the Rajaram Mohan Roy, okay, who compared Indian society with the West, and on the basis of that, they tried to come up with various reforms. Like he pursued the abolition of sati, or Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, he tried to fight for the remarriage of the various widows. Okay, so these are the two basic categories, all right, and the major impact of these movement was limited to urban areas. All right, so we'll discuss in detail of these religious reform movements, okay, later on. Now, one thing which you have to understand, the British started expanding their dominion starting from 1764, okay, and this continued till 1856. If we even consider Plassey, then it becomes roughly 100 years. Okay. Similar was the time, during this time, we see these various peasant movements, tribal movements, as well as various reform movements. But when we talk in terms of nationalism, people they were not together. The understanding of the British imperialism, it was very less. Okay, they were trying to ameliorate or trying to reform their local situation. Like suppose if somebody started a revolt against the government, when the government addressed those local factors, they again things back to normal. Nobody was thinking in terms of the entity as India. And this is something which all of you have to understand, that what is the meaning of nationalism? If we see, all of you mean nation. Nation is a cultural concept. If we see the Western concept of nation, it means people should have common kind of language or religion. Like if you see English people, okay, they all speak the same language, that is English. Majority of them, they are followers of Christianity. So this is how in West, the concept of nation, it means the similarity between the people. But this concept doesn't work in case of India. So many diversity, people of different kind, different languages, different culture. So in Indian case, when we talk about nationalism, it is often contested that Indian nationalism was born because of the atrocities of the British, and it was this anti-British attitude which led to the emergence of India. Okay, because in India we had different states, different principalities. When all of them started suffering in the hands of the British, it led to the creation of a system of India. It was this British which were creating this uniform administration in whole of India. It was them who created the modern rule of law, means of communications. So it becomes a very big debate that does Indian nationalism borrow its origin from the British rule? ठीक है, तो ऐसी कुछ डिबेट्स हैं जो हमें समझनी पड़ेंगी. बट वन थिंग विच इज वेरी क्लियर दैट इनिशियली nationalism has always been a reaction to imperialism and the negative outcome of the same. However, if we see in the long run, Indian nationalism was going to see certain converged form of heritage. Like it's not that for the first time we have seen any empire. We have seen like Mauryan Empire, which was on a very big scale. Similarly, we had seen Gupta Empire. We have seen even the unity at the time of the Delhi Sultanate as well as the Mughals. So it was not so for the first time India's geography was getting unity under the hands of British. It's just that those people were not exploiting in the way British were exploiting the people of India. So when we talk about Indian nationalism, आपने term बार-बार सुना होगा, unity in diversity. So Indian nationalism is made on this concept. Whenever we see diversity, what did people say from the West? They say India is not a one nation. That's how we see the development of two nation theory also, which differentiated the Hindus from the Muslims. But we do not accept that. However, this theory eventually became the basis for the partition of India and Pakistan. But if we see today, more Muslims are in India than in Pakistan. So can we accept this theory? No. If we accept this theory, it will be very difficult to live under one house. So in India, what the thing you have to remember, we have a very converged heritage and we are able to make bigger goals which drive progress for all the communities. So India's nationalism is inclusive in nature of each and every community. It may have started as a antithesis or as a result of the imposition of imperialism by the British, but Indian nationalism was also going to get affected by various events which you need to understand. Like when these religious reforms were beginning, they provided the first wave of nationalism because these reforms were trying to safeguard Indian culture. So this was the first form of nationalism, when you are defending your culture. Politically you are not very sound, people are not together, but still you are trying to safeguard it. Like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he criticized the various Christian missionaries who were trying to feed into the mind of the young children that Indians are backward, Indians are stupid, do not listen to your mom and dad. Okay, this is how they were defending their culture, defending the ethos of Indian being Indianness. This was the first phase of the nationalism. Similarly, when people like Dada Bhai Naroji, they started criticizing the British rule, which eventually came to known as a drain of wealth. That was also a sign of nationalism, where we're trying to protect the resources of India, because we were under the impression resources of India should be used for the development of our own country, not for the development of Britain. This thing you should always remember. We may not have been part of the industrial revolution of Britain directly, but indirectly they had taken everything from India and they have developed and we have provided that. तो इंडिया की आज तक की सबसे बड़ी सब्सिडी इंडियन लोगों को नहीं गई है. The biggest subsidy has gone to Britain, and you must have heard these debates keep on coming time and again, है ना? Honorable MP Shashi Tharoor, he was the one who was the part of this important debate, where he said if we multiply है ना, inflation के basis पे अगर हम देखें, the amount of drain of wealth which happened, it's even more than the current GDP of Britain. So even if we want to take, तो हम नहीं ले पाएंगे, उसके लिए हमें complete Britain के ऊपर कब्जा करना पड़ेगा. If we want to do amends economically, but is it feasible today? No, it is not feasible. That's why he said this is not feasible, so just say sorry to us at least. That can be a kind of, you can say ना, मलहम लग जाएगा हमारे घाव पर. Alright, so this was the second phase where the nationalism, it was not coming in the political tone, but it was coming in terms of safeguarding of the resources of India. Then we see creation of various political organizations, but they were at a regional level, like Madras Native Association or British India Association in Calcutta. Okay, so these were regional association. The All India platform was eventually the creation of Congress in 1885. So this was a representation of the political nationalism of Indians at the national scale. Okay, and thereafter, after this political nationalism, we see different shades of nationalism. Like within this, you have the moderates, okay, then we have the extremists, then we have Gandhian form of nationalism, socialist form of nationalism, which say we do not want dominion status, we want complete independence. We also see the nationalism from the other kind of communities, communities in terms of the capitalist, working class. So nationalism has so many shades. It starts from here and it eventually reaches the political nationalism, which again is going to have different kinds of ideologies later on. Okay? So whenever we talk about nationalism, try to remember this. The revolt of 1857, it did not succeed because Indians were lacking nationalism. Okay, the nationalism concept is always about understanding that we have a common heritage, plus we have a conversed future, and our interests are not colliding with each other. अगर हम वो मानने लग गए कि our interests are going to collide, we can never stay together. And this is the reason why the various countries, they have civil wars, because various communities, they don't want to live together. This is the reason. Okay, so this concept of nationalism you have to understand, and it begins with the religious form or the socio-religious reforms, economic nationalism, and later it entered into the era of politics, where the active politics were going to take this question to the British. That's why it became, when it became prominent, they said we want Swaraj. Why Swaraj? Because when you are governing us, you are taking away our resources. You are coming up with various policies which are affecting our culture. That's why the question of Swaraj came in the beginning of the 20th century. Before this, it was not coming, because we had become politically united at the national level. That's how we went towards that phase. ठीक है, तो ये आपको थोड़ा समझना पड़ेगा. Then the second phase of modern India, it starts with the revolt of 1857. All of you know the revolt, it starts with the conspiracy, okay, or the mutiny of the army, and later on it turns into a complete revolt. The major centers of revolt, they were in North India and Central India. When we try to identify what are the major factors responsible for this revolt of 1857, we again try to identify this one format. You have to always remember, whenever we look for factors for any specific event, any cause, you have to divide into political, economic, social. In this case, even the immediate factor, it was affected by the religious sentiments. All of you know about those cartridges, and they were under the impression they are made from the meat of cow and chicken. So because of this, both Hindus as well as the Muslims, because pork was used, they were offended, and this became the immediate reason. But do you think just this reason can lead to a big revolt like 1857? No. So whenever we analyze any event, we try to identify different kind of event. Like here we can say, yes, this was the immediate reason, but the larger issues, they were somewhere in political, economic and social causes. Political, like the policies of Dalhousie from 1848 till 1856, he was able to annex so many states, and that's why the various military men known as sepoys, they were against him. And we see the political causes. We again see the ruthlessness of the British. We were not given any kind of presentation in the administration. If majority of the higher posts, they were under the control of the British, so Indians were not having that privilege to become part of it. There was a distance between the ruler and the ruled. This was the outcome of the political problems of India. Economic causes, as we have already seen, that they were the one who introduced land revenues, okay, which affected the Indian peasantry in a very bad manner. The deindustrialization of India also happened because of them. People were suffering. Social causes, if we see some of the social reforms done by them, the Indian people were not ready for those reforms, like the abolition of sati or the widow remarriage. Indian people thought that these people are trying to affect our culture. So something which may be considered as progressive was not seen by the Indian people in the same light. So that became a part of the social cause. So when all these causes combined, that led to this revolt of 1857. You have to also understand these various words. Like when do we use the word revolt? When do we use the word revolution? When do we use the word movement? When do we use the word uprising? तो बहुत सारे वर्ड्स हैं, कहाँ पे क्या यूज करते हैं. Alright, so uprising, a band of people come together and they start the fight. The scale is always going to be less in a uprising. When the scale is of higher order, it becomes a revolt. Okay, and a successful revolt is known as a revolution. And when the movement word कब use होगा? When we have a central leader for that purpose, it eventually becomes a movement. ठीक है? And majority of the movements, they are in a peaceful manner, which is not a part of the rest of the three, because in all these rest three, there is always going to be warfare, always going to be death of people. Okay, and revolution also has one important factor, that a successful revolt का मतलब क्या हुआ? Means there should be large scale, sudden, fundamental changes. If they are not going to happen, then we cannot consider it as a revolution. अभी आप इसको समझोगे बहुत, जैसा कि अमेरिकन वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस है, तो अमेरिकन वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस व्हेन it was fought more for the changes which has already happened rather than for any revolutionary change. So that's why we do not use the word American Revolution so much, even though जो आपकी मेन स्ट्रीम वोकेबुलरी है उसमें वर्ड आता है अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, बट द अप्रोप्रिएट वर्ड इज अमेरिकन वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस. सिमिलरली वी यूज द वर्ड फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन बिकॉज इट इज एप्ट. इट वाज मार्क्ड बाय लार्ज स्केल सोशो इकोनॉमिक चेंजेस. ठीक है, तो ये थोड़े थोड़े वर्ड कभी बार मैं यूज कर लेता हूं तो आपको लगता है भाई क्या, व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ देम. लिटरली आपको ये नहीं लेना है. जब आंसर लिखोगे तो कभी कभार द अपराइजिंग ऑफ 1857 और द रिवोल्ट ऑफ 1857 ये दोनों चल जाएंगे, बिकॉज देयर इज ओनली ए स्मॉल डिफरेंस. अब कौन कैसे बता सकता है कि भाई कितना अपराइजिंग होता है, कहां तक रिवोल्ट होता है? देयर इज नो सच डेफिनेशन. बट यू कैन नॉट यूज द वर्ड रेवोल्यूशन फॉर द रिवोल्ट बिकॉज इट वाज अनसक्सेसफुल. सिमिलरली मूवमेंट जो है ये हम वर्ड यूज करते हैं फॉर द पीसेंट मूवमेंट, फॉर द गांधीयन मूवमेंट, वेयर वी हैव अ सर्टेन सेक्शन ऑफ एंड दे गो ऑन फॉर ए लार्ज टाइम. मूवमेंट का ऐसा नहीं होता कि एक दिन रिवोल्ट हुआ खत्म हो गया. It's always going to be for a larger time frame. ठीक है, तो ये वर्ड्स के बीच में आपको डिफरेंशिएशन सीखना पड़ेगा. ओके, यस शांतनु, करेक्ट, यस. म्यूटनी. Mutiny is when it is specifically from an army. Some of the army men, they have raised the banner of revolt, but they have started the fight against the mainstream establishment. Then it is known as a mutiny. जैसे कि जब हम बात करते हैं ना रिवोल्ट ऑफ 1857, तो ऐसा बोला जाता है इट बिगेन एज अ म्यूटिनी ऑफ द सिपॉइज ऑफ द आर्मी मैन, एंड देन व्हेन द मेन स्ट्रीम पब्लिक जॉइंड इट, देन इट बिकेम अ रिवोल्ट. तो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन फ्रॉम वन कैरेक्टर टू अदर इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू हैपन. ठीक है, वो भी हो सकता है, स्टार्ट किसी तरीके से होगा और एंड किसी तरीके से होगा. लाइक व्हेन वी से क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, क्विट इंडिया movement, initially there was not violence, है ना. all the mainstream leaders, they were attacked by the British, है ना, and they were taken to various prisons. But then, as all of you know, in urban areas and then later in the rural areas, violence began. That's why उस पे एक statement आता है कि it was August Revolution. You must have heard this term. We'll go into the debate part of it later on. But one thing which you have to remember, there can be a shift from one part to another. Like here we shift from mutiny to revolt. बस डिपेंड करता है किसका पार्टिसिपेशन है, कितना आउटकम है, कितने टाइम के लिए चला है, all those aspects. So these are the various terms which will be used in paper 2 specifically. Okay, so I hope you are able to understand the revolt of 1857. Revolt of 1857 has become a very important chapter in India's struggle. Why? Because as a result, in 1858, the rule of the company was scrapped. उसको बंद कर दिया. Okay, and we see the beginning of the crown rule. Along with these, the various policies of the previous time, they were also reversed. The British realized in 1858 that all these native states, they helped them during the revolt of 1857. That's why the policies toward these states now became more benevolent. उनको प्यार से बात करने लग गए, 7 तोपों की सलामी देने लग गए to all these native states कि बर्थडे है इनका आज तो सलामी देनी पड़ेगी. Why were they doing so? They were appeasing these people now. Okay, what was happening before 1857? Awadh was annexed. Before that, so many states were annexed. So this whole policy of annexation was given up. In 1858, there was a Queen's Proclamation which was announced by Lord Canning at Allahabad. And as per this policy, we see that many of the previous policies, including of annexation, including the manner in which the various states were treated, those changed. Similarly, Indians, they were not part of administration till 1858 in a major manner. Starting from 1861, they created councils for the first time. और council का काम क्या है? In that, they can appoint some people from India so that they can eventually taste some power and the grievances of the people can be resolved. So decentralization of power, it starts from 1858. Some of the economic policies also, they were reversed. The manner in which they have looted and plundered it, this comes under phases of colonialism. So this you can understand broadly that from 1813, as all of you know, in 1813 the trade monopoly, okay, this was broken, except they just left tea and trade with China. So from 1830, one-way free trade continued till 1858. This was the phase of one-way free trade. Okay, this is how they were exploiting us. Starting from 1860s, they shifted towards finance capitalism, where they started investing in larger projects, okay, rather than using this policy of one-way free trade. So there are various phases of colonialism. The first phase, which I'll discuss you later on, because थोड़ा सा difficult है, it's the phase of mercantilism. Mercantilism means use of political power for accumulation of wealth. So the first phase of colonialism, economic terms, it was the phase of mercantilism. The British were getting new power in Bengal, then it was expanded to the rest of the areas. So that's why the manner in which they exploited us economically. These are the three phases which you can remember. Mercantilism, the roughly first 50-60 years, then the phase of one-way free trade. Initially, only company was exploiting us, right? Thereafter, from 1813 onwards, all the industrialists of the Britain, they were now allowed to trade with India. So that's why it is known as one-way free trade as well as industrial kind of exploitation. And from 1860s, like in railway, investment was done by the British. They invested in the plantation agriculture. So that way it is known as finance capitalism. They invested some money in India and took out the returns later on. Okay? So these are the three phases of colonialism which you can remember. So this policy also changed from one-way free trade to finance capitalism because of this, it is unseen. People will not be able to analyze it. One-way free trade can be easily seen कि हमारे goods पे tax लगा रहे हैं, अपने पे नहीं लगा रहे हैं. That can be easily seen. So they started providing some protection to Indians' goods. So all those policies were going to change with respect to governance, with respect to economy, all those things. Even with respect to army, since the revolt has happened, they increased the number of European officers. Like in Bengal, they came with the ratio of 2:5 कि कम से कम 40% लोग कौन से होना चाहिए, British origin rather than of India. All the strategic posts, they were given now to the British because they could not trust Indians thereafter. So that's why the year 1858 is of very importance for India, as there is reversal of the manner in which India was governed. Okay. So as an extension from 1858, we see Council famous Act of 1861, then of 1892. So what they are doing, they are trying to increase the size of the council one after the another. And all of you know the most infamous is the 1909, which provided separate electorate to the Muslims. Okay. Thereafter we have 1919, then the Government of India Act of 1935, and finally comes 1947. Just have to remember the years. The provisions in detail along with their positives, negatives will do later on. But the governance process under the crown starts from 1858, 61, 92, 1909, 1919, 35 and then 47. 47 Act is not that much important from governance point of view, because उसमें क्या किया था? It was just like India and Pakistan are now free. तो सिर्फ एक तरीके से 47 का एक्ट क्या है? It's just a statement. Now both the dominions are having freedom. Okay, or independence was given to both. So till 1935, the governance is still important till 1935. As all of you know, 50 to 60% of Indian Constitution, it is based upon the Act of 1935. That's why this is the most important act of the British. है ना? All of us, when we talk about reservation, the reservation का basis कहाँ से start हुआ? It starts from 1935 with the creation of the schedule lists. Okay, because this was done by the British with the motive that these people required certain kind of safeguards, which eventually became the system of reservation later on. Even the federal form of government of India, it is on the basis of 1935 Act. I'm not saying that there were not shortcomings. Yes, there were large number of problems with these acts, which we'll discuss later on. And the biggest problem was the discretionary power which was given to the Governor General as well as the Governor of the provinces. That was always the problem. The British never allowed Indians to have a certain kind of power which can dilute their authority. वो कभी नहीं allow करने वाले थे वो. But these are the acts which were going to affect India till independence, and you should have a brief understanding of these. Okay. Now when we talk about the mainstream polity, it is from 1885 till 1947. This is the mainstream polity which all of you need to understand. ठीक है. अब इसके अंदर बहुत सारे different kind of personalities are going to come, है ना? So what you have understand so far that modern India में सिर्फ freedom नहीं है. There are so many things in and around it. We have to understand all the aspect of that. We have to understand the nature of polity, economy, social reforms. All those things we have to understand. Without this, we can never understand the modern India in a complete manner. That's why modern India becomes the most challenging portion for our optional. Even the syllabus is divided into 15 parts. बाकी सारे को 12 parts में divide किया गया. यहाँ पे we have 15 because after 1947 also there is one small part known as post independence, in which we cover the era of 47 to 64, which is co-terminus with the death of India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. So we mostly try to understand his policies and the initial creation of the structure of the state. Anyway, so when we go from 1885 to 1947, just try to understand the phases. From 1885 till 1905, this phase is known as the phase of moderates. Okay, the phase of moderates, which has leaders like Surendranath Banerjee, Dada Bhai Naroji, W.C. Banerjee was the first president, okay, in 1885. So these were the various leaders, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and the kind of demands of this phase were very limited in nature. So what they said, what kind of demand would they want? They would say that the number of Indian should be increased in the administration, the expenditures on wars and battles should be reduced, right? The land revenue, it should be increased or decreased. They did not take the issue of land revenue at all. Why? Because this was the first phase, and that's why their demands were of very moderate nature. And these people were relatively scared of the British authority because they were not having any mass base, right? You have to understand this. These people were meeting, but they were not having the mass base. They did not even take the issue of social reforms because they were of the understanding that these delegates themselves will get divided on the basis of the caste, and this will affect the political objective with which the Congress was created in 1885. So that's why the first phase of moderate is mostly famous for one theory, and that is theory of drain of wealth, which was given by Dadabhai Naoroji along with the other important personalities like R.C. Dutt, M.G. Ranade. All of them, they came up with their different works. Like Dadabhai Naoroji came with Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Similarly, M.G. Ranade came with Essays on Indian Economics. R.C. Dutt will come with Economic History of India. All these important works eventually led to the creation of the demand that there should be self-rule. Since India is not being governed with the important things which will lead to development, Indians should rule themselves, but they never asked for complete independence. They had already seen the model of Australia, they had seen the model of Ireland. So that's why the demand of the Swaraj was eventually going to come in 1905, okay, which will become prominent from 1906. Another important defining event, it happened in 1905, okay, and this was the partition of Bengal. When the partition of Bengal was done, this eventually led to the rise of the second phase, the rise of extremists. Extremists known by the trilogy of Lal, Bal and Pal, the three important personalities. Okay, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, these were the prominent personalities of the extremists, and their first major demand that we should have self-rule. Bal Gangadhar, you must have heard also, he said, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. They started focusing on masses. The first phase was not having the faith of the masses. Now the mass struggle was going to become important in this second phase. The first movement, first mass movement, it is the Swadeshi movement, which started in 1905 at the end and became prominent to annul the partition of Bengal, which was done in 1911. So this is the era of the, then problem is in this second phase, because the leadership was getting changed from moderate to extremist, naturally the friction was going to begin. Okay, these are just nomenclatures. Both these people, they were working in the same party, Indian National Congress. We are coming up with these nomenclatures on the basis of the demand, on the basis of the persistence or the faith in the masses. That's why one defining event in Indian politics was 1907, also known as Surat Split. And because of this, the moderates and the extremists, they couldn't work together. The extremists, they were expelled from the Congress, and it remained mostly an organization of the moderates. And this continued till 1916. In 1916, we have the famous session of where? Lucknow. Very good. So Lucknow, where we see the unity. And eventually in 1917, Annie Besant was chosen as the president, which is a reflection that the extremist was now going to lead the movement in the coming times. Okay, but the problem with extremists is this majority phase of roughly 10 years, it was not having any active politics. All of you also need to understand that Indian history is not separate from world wars. British were ruling us from 1914. We see the beginning of the First World War, and as the beginning of this, in 1915, they passed an infamous act known as Defense of India Act. You can just think of it like an emergency powers which are given to the President of India. At that point of time, many of the fundamental rights that we enjoy, they are not taken into consideration. Okay, so at that point of time, British, they came with draconian measures, including no warrant is required, just mere suspicion, or known as preventive detention. These provisions could be used for suppressing the people. No proper trials were done, and this was done all in the name of Defence of India Act. But at the time of First World War, which was fought from 1914 to 1918, Indians were under the impression that if we can show or project ourselves as good children, okay, in the end British is going to provide you some kind of reforms, or at least they will provide us self rule. This is what their understanding was. That's why even when Gandhiji came in the early 1915, he was also supporting the British war efforts, even though the general public of India, it was getting affected by the provisions of these act. Similar time was eventually chosen by revolutionaries. When we talk about revolutionaries, the revolutionaries are going to rise during the first decade of 20th century. The famous personalities of the initial part, all of you know the Chapekar brothers. Or what these people were trying to do, they tried to assassinate the various corrupt officials whose policies were affecting Indians. Like there was one Mr. Rand, who was the commissioner of the Pune Plague Commission, and he was executed by the Chapekar brothers. And that was the beginning of these revolutionaries in 1897. But this became more prominent from the first decade, like the creation of the Abhinav Bharat, Mitra Mela. These were the initial revolutionary organization, and they were increasing in the areas of Bengal as well as Maharashtra. All of you know about V.D. Savarkar. So he was also a famous personality of this phase. So these revolutionaries were increasing their footprint, and when the Swadeshi movement, it eventually died down, okay, as a result of the Surat split, they became very active. Some of the Indian revolutionaries had also been outside or in abroad. Like when we talk about the Gadar movement, we had Lala Hardyal, and he was the one who tried to create the atmosphere that the Punjabis could come together and they could fight with the British. But that didn't work out in 1915, because the British were already having the information about their whereabouts and what they're going to do in India. So these revolutionary organizations kept on increasing their footprint in India, but still a larger organization was going to be created only in the third decade of 20th century. All of you know about the Hindustan Republic Association that will be created later on, but this was the phase where they were trying to do it on their own and through the assassination of the various officials, and being very active in three areas: Punjab, Bengal and Maharashtra, three areas. Okay, so this continued from 1914 to 18. From 1916 onwards, an innovative movement known as Home Rule Movement. This was started by two personalities from Extremists. One is Annie Besant and second is Bal Gangadhar Tilak himself. And what they were trying to do, they were not trying to teach people anything against the British government, but they were trying to increase the popularity of home rule or Swaraj, so that we can also demand the same from the government. But as all of you know, this was also not liked by the British, and what they did, they put Annie Besant under house arrest, and after protest she was eventually released and she could come out of that. But there comes a proclamation in 1970 that is known as Montague Declaration, and they declared that responsible government is the long-term policy of the British government and will do reforms accordingly. So after this declaration, eventually the Home Rule League, they eventually became feeble. Okay, this was also the time where Gandhiji were trying to increase his footprints. Like he arrived in 1915, his political guru was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. In 1916, he gave a lecture, okay, where बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी, वहां पे उन्होंने जाके lecture दिया in 1916 that this suit boot kind of get up of the Congress is not going to lead to any kind of goodness for the lower people. Okay, so he said we should identify with them. From 1917, Gandhiji started doing his smaller projects. All of you know about Champaran. Okay, so in 1917 he visited that place, so saw the problems faced by the peasantry. Similarly, thereafter, Ahmedabad mill strike, he worked for the workers, and later on the Kheda Satyagraha. So these became the initial defining moments of Gandhiji, where he was successful. Now Gandhiji was a little bit different from the kind of politics which was being played in the rest of India at that point of time. He said we should have complete faith in the capacity of the masses. We should involve them more and more. Even though they had participated in the Swadeshi movement, but the impact of that could not be seen on British administration. So, after unity between the moderates and extremists in 1916, by 1919, majority of the leaders, they were getting dissatisfied. Okay, the reason was the World War ended, various peace treaties were signed with the losing powers. All of you know about that, right? The famous Treaty of Versailles was signed with Germany, and there was one Treaty of Sevres, which was signed with Turkey. Okay, and in 1919, Indians were expecting that they had already declared in 1917 that responsible government is preferred by them. But this did not happen in 1919. In fact, to the amazement of India, they came up with the infamous Rowlatt Act. What this act did, all the provisions of the Defence of India Act, which were emergency powers taken by the state, they were put under this Rowlatt Act. And Indians, they were incensed that the war is over. Why are you now using these provisions? And that's why influential people like Rabindranath Tagore, Gandhiji, they gave up all their titles. And Gandhiji said we should start a satyagraha against this Rowlatt Act. And when it was organized, it didn't go very well. The Rowlatt Satyagraha failed eventually because when the law and order became a bit affected in the era of Punjab, there martial law was pronounced, and when people came out to celebrate Baisakhi on 13th of April 1919, all of you know what was done by General Dyer. He ordered the troops to open fire on the unarmed people, and that's why Gandhiji, when he started this Rowlatt Satyagraha against this act, this was taken back in 1919. Okay, so the politics starting from 1919 is going to eventually be affected by these issues. One, this Rowlatt Act. Second, Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And the third issue, this will become the issue against the Treaty of Sevres. This Treaty of Sevres was imposed on Ottoman Empire, and the inheritance of the Ottoman Empire, it went to Turkey. Because of this Treaty of Sevres, what was happening, that the religious places of the Muslims, they were getting divided into different political boundaries, and they were against it, that this should not happen. Our religious places should stay under the nominal control of the Caliph. This was their understanding. So that's why Indian politics from 1919 onwards was going to get affected by these three events. This will eventually lead to the beginning of Khilafat movement. Gandhi is going to spearhead this movement along with the Ali brothers. Okay, and later on we'll see a merger of non-cooperation movement, which will include the issues of Rowlatt Act along with Jallianwala Bagh massacre. There was one commission known as Hunter Commission. It came out with reports on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and did not provide any kind of punishment to General Dyer, and that also became one of the reasons for the unhappiness for the people of India. So all this merged and this eventually became first the Khilafat movement and later the non-cooperation movement from 1920 onwards. This continued from 1920. Gandhiji became the undisputed leader of the masses. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he had died by 1920 August. Okay, so that's why we are not having any specific leader by 1920, and Gandhiji was eventually accepted by the masses. This continued till 1922. All of you know about the Chauri Chaura incident, and that's why it was called off. After 1922, when it was called off, it again created a schism or kind of faction within Congress. The Government of India Act 1919 had already been passed by the British, and elections were to be held under this act. So some of the people like C.R. Das, Motilal Nehru, they said we should fight these elections, enter the legislature and lead this non-cooperation even to the legislative assembly. But people like Gandhiji and his followers, including Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, C. Rajgopalacharya, they said isse kuch nahi hone wala. This is not going to work as such. So eventually they had to come to peace terms, because in 1907 already we had seen one split, okay, and that wasted 10 years. No pressure could be put on the British. After 1907 the next movement was Home Rule League in 1916. 10 साल कुछ नहीं हुआ. They realized कि यार ऐसा बार बार होने लगा तो कुछ नहीं होने वाला. Our political activities continue like this. So what happened eventually? That Congress decided, ठीक है, they can take part in the elections, but only as a part of the Congress itself. So Congress committee, इन्होंने एक कमेटी बनाया, Congress खिलाफत स्वराज कमेटी, and this is known as Swarajist. And two prominent personalities for that were Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das. And they participated in these elections and they were able to win also. Around 40 of the 105, 106 seats they were able to win. Complete majority nahi aaya, but they were able to do so. Okay, they also continued. Now, the active part of the politics ended in 22. This was the passive phase. Passive phase means elections कर रहे हैं, government का part बन गए. So this continued from 1923 till 1927. In 1927, the British Indian government appointed one commission to review the functioning of the Act of 1919. It is known as Simon Commission. John Simon was the chairman of this commission. It had 7 members, and all the people of this commission, they were white. Okay, they were white. The British government did not found it useful to have even one person from India as a part of the commission, and this was not liked by the various parties, and that's why all of you know the Indian politics again entered a active phase from 1927 onwards, and this is known as the beginning of the protest against the Simon Commission. The famous slogan, Simon, go back. It started from 1927 and in this, one of these protests we see that one of our favorite leader, Lala Lajpat Rai, he was wounded because of the lathi charge and eventually he succumbed to the death. Thereafter in 1928, okay, Indians, they eventually said that rather than your commission, Simon Commission, we can create our own commission, okay, for providing a constitutional structure to the people of India, and that came to known as Motilal Nehru Report, prominently known by the name Nehru Report, also known as a mini constitution. This was created, okay. The Secretary of the State at that point of time was Lord Birkenhead. He said, Agar, if you people of India can do it by yourself, so show it to me. And this was an outcome. Okay, this was appointed in 1927 itself. Indians, they created an all-party conference, and then Motilal Nehru was chosen and he came out with a report in 1928. As all of you know, British इसको मानने वाले तो थे नहीं. It was just a way of delaying the process. कि उनको बोल दिया हाँ ठीक है, we'll accept, come up with your own report. Indians ने literally ले लिया. So thereafter, when this report was not accepted, so Gandhi ji put forward his demands, okay, which later on, before that we had this famous Lahore session of 1929 where the demands were not accepted. Gandhi ji said, if this is not accepted within 1 year, okay, then our demand is going to change from the dominion status or Swaraj to complete independence. And when this was not done in 1929, we see the declaration of the first Independence Day, okay, and that was eventually celebrated on 26th of January 1930. Okay, so this happened in 1929, and power was given to Gandhi ji. By you can choose whatever kind of movement you want to start, you have the power to do so in the early 1930. But Gandhi ji again gave some 11 demands to the government that if you can accept these demands, then I'm not going to start any movement. And when even that was not acceptable to the government, by March he started the famous Dandi March, which became the opening chapter of civil disobedience movement. Okay, so from 1929 onwards, you have to remember the objective of the Congress switched from dominion status, Swaraj, towards complete independence. So it starts from 1930. In 1931, as all of you know, Simon Commission had already given its report. Nehru report was rejected by the British. So in order to discuss the provisions, the British wanted to have round table conferences so that the next act can be passed. But since civil disobedience movement was going on in India, the Congress boycotted the first round table conference. Okay, so boycott kar diya. It was going to happen in London. In 1931, an understanding was reached with Lord Irwin, who was the Governor General or the Viceroy, okay, at that point of time, and Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed. So we have 3 round table conference. First was rejected by the Congress. In second, we see Gandhi ji participated. He was having the complete say on behalf of people of India. But Gandhi ji also came from this empty-handed. Reason was Gandhiji was projecting himself as the voice of whole of India, but this was not so. By this time, Muslim League, by this time, B.R. Ambedkar became the main proponent of the ideas with respect to how development of the scheduled caste is going to happen, and the issue of reservation, which was going to affect Indian politics. Okay, because of all these factors, Gandhiji came back to India empty-handed. As all of you know, in 1909, the separate electorate was given to the Muslim. In 1919, it was further extended and it was given to whom? It was given to Sikhs, Jamindars as well as the Anglo-Christian. It was given to them. And the further redroll, what they were asking at this point of time, that this should be extended to the depressed classes or the scheduled class. This was not acceptable to Gandhiji. Okay, thereafter Gandhiji rejected it, and third was further not attended by Congress. So only round table conference in which Congress participated, it is the second round table conference. You have to remember this as a fact. Okay, then from 1931, when Gandhiji came back from London, all the negotiations has failed. He had temporarily stopped the civil disobedience movement. He again restarted it. But at this point of time, many people did not came to support Gandhiji. Reason was, everybody was under the impression that this Gandhi-Irwin Pact will be able to overturn the sentence which was given to 3 important revolutionaries, that were Bhagat Singh, then Rajguru as well as Sukhdev. But that did not happen. Even the business class people who were supporting them were now not going to do so because they were having multiple losses. Okay, so this was again, Congress was banned by the government. In 1932, when Gandhiji he was in jail, a famous award known as MacDonald Award, and it came from the Prime Minister of Britain. This provided separate electorate to the scheduled caste. Gandhiji thought that if these people are provided separate electorate, you understand the meaning of separate electorate? It means only scheduled caste can vote when in a specific seat scheduled caste is contesting, means पूरा complete separate हो जाता है population. In today's system, some of the constituencies they are reserved for scheduled tribe as well as scheduled caste, but all the people of that constituency can vote. Think of a system where only the people of the same community can vote. That is known as separate electorate. And Gandhiji thought if this is going to happen, this is going to create permanent division among the communities of India. And we can never be able to overturn such a situation. That's why Gandhiji went for fast, and finally Pune Pact was signed between B.R. Ambedkar and Gandhiji, and rather than separate electorate, reservation was given to these communities. But this became prominent in 1932. But this situation continued. Then government eventually in 1935 came up with the Government of India Act of 1935. This was a voluminous act, and now elections were to be held, and these elections were to be conducted from 1937. वहां से उसको start होना है. Congress participated in these elections, was able to create government in 8 out of 11 provinces of British India. They were able to do so. This was the time when Muslim League performed badly in the elections. They were not able to win even in the Muslim seats which were reserved for them. That's why this was the time where we see change in the character of Jinnah. Now, rather than thinking about other issue, the issue which is going to be mostly used by him would be that Islam is in danger. When Congress roughly ruled for 28 months, okay? In 1939, Congress resigned. As all of you know, 1939 was the defining year because we see the beginning of Second World War, and at this point of time when World War has begun, British had made India a party to the Second World War, and that too without consulting the government of India, of the Indian citizens. Okay, and that's why Congress, which won in election in 1937, resigned in 1939, and this became the rule of 28 months. And this was celebrated by Muslim League by the day of deliverance. Okay, so this is how the fight now going to become very prominent later on. So in 1939, Congress ministries resigned, but Gandhiji was under the impression that this is a fight between the fascist powers of Germany, Italy, okay, versus Britain. That's why he saw a moral angle in this, and that's why he did not start a mass movement in 1939, even though the Congress ministries has resigned. They came up with different kinds of system. Like in 1940, they started the individual satyagrah, where the famous leaders like Acharya Vinoba as well as Jawaharlal Nehru, they are going to educate people that what they want to have in the future. In 1941, one defining event was going to happen. Japan is going to attack USA in December, the Pearl Harbor incident. And that's why when pressure increased again on the British and Indians, they were not going to help them. They sent the famous Cripps Mission in 1942. But this Cripps mission was having one kind of mindset: everything will be given to you, but only after the war. That's why Gandhi ji say कि भाई एक तो वैसे ही तुम हार रहे हो वहाँ पे, है ना? It is a post-dated check, है ना? And Nehru ji, it is on a failing bank, है ना? कि चेक काट के दे रहे हो कि बाद में देंगे, 5 साल बाद ले लेना हमसे. And Nehru ji said, and that too you are losing in front of the Germans. Okay, so this is how in 1942 the negotiations failed. But since Japan has entered the Second World War and they were trying to capture the territories of Southeast Asia, Gandhi ji became very particular that the defense of India should, we have to justify it somehow because he is the father of the nation. We cannot criticize him, but we have to understand what were the circumstances in which it was done, what were the problems, okay, what was the justification approach for understanding any event, where he is saying this is more bad than this. That's why I am choosing this, because Japanese are coming, we have to safeguard our nation. So this continued till 1944. It was never called off. Okay, Gandhiji, he was released from jail in 1944 on the ground of health. Okay, and later on, from 1945, as all of us know, by 1945 the World War was over. The first negotiation, official one, it came to known as Wavell Plan or the Shimla Conference. British now were ready for transfer of power. They had already lost their superpower status by the end of the Second World War. The rise of the powers of USA and USSR can be easily seen in the Second World War. They realized या तो इज्जत से चले जाओ or you will be beaten and then thrown out. That's why they realized by 1945, okay, we are ready for the transfer of power. But before transfer of power, there should be creation of an interim government. And both these parties, Muslim League as well as Congress, should participate in this. But the deadlock between these two parties was now going to become very severe for the people of India. Muslim League said in this that all the Muslim members should be chosen by the Muslim League, and this was not acceptable to the Congress because it would lead to them being projected as a Hindu organization. So this whole conference failed. In 1946, we see the coming of the Cabinet Mission Plan. This Cabinet Mission Plan met all the parties and later on gave this recommendation. It was also not in favor of creation of Pakistan. Okay, and what it did, it reorganized the various states of India into 3 groups. One was the group where the Hindus were in majority, second where the Muslims were in majority, and third where we had the states like West Bengal, okay, where, or the Bangla you can say, where we had both kind of population, okay, Hindus as well as Muslims. So very, you can say, complex kind of provisions were created, that groupings will be done, constitution will be created for every grouping, and after 10 years these states can come from these groupings. So this was not liked by the Congress, and Congress did not like this Cabinet Mission Plan. But Muslim League initially joined it. They thought that this grouping is permanent and the Muslim states will be under their control. But later on, when the Viceroy Lord Wavell refused to create interim government only with Muslim League, Muslim League said we are not accepting the Cabinet Mission Plan, and they rejected it on 29th of July 1946. Congress thought that at least let us create a constituent assembly, which was also one of the provision of Cabinet Mission Plan. They became, elections were held, and from 9th to 11th of December, the proceedings begin for creation of an constituent assembly which will draft India's constitution. This was not liked by the Muslim League. Why? Because they thought that this constituent assembly is going to create constitution for whole of India, which will defeat their objective. Their objective was now to create a separate state on the basis of religion. Okay, So starting from 16th August, they started what is known as direct action, meaning the use of the communal riots for the creation of Pakistan. And this was becoming, or you can say increasing day after day. Large number of people, they were dying. The British administration had given up hope. They were not controlling it because they thought unless this is going to happen, no resolution is going to happen in India. कुछ ना कुछ तो होने दो. They were now not interested in this Hindu-Muslim. You can do whatever you wish to do. Even though the British were the initial people who were responsible for the creation of these diverse understanding among the communities that used to belong to two different groups. And now they were ignoring it, not doing anything at the level of administration. So eventually the Muslim League was somehow made to come into the interim government, but in interim government also they started creating a kind of criticism of the various ministers. Think of like this: Home Minister is criticizing Finance Minister in the public, Finance Minister is criticizing the Science and Technology Minister. So this is how the Muslim League and Congress were now fighting in the interim government itself, as well as they were fighting in the open also. So because of these factors, when no resolution was seeing close, we see the coming of Mountbatten. Mountbatten was a person from Navy, okay, and when he came to India, he realized cabinet mission plan is not going to work. I have to come up with something else. So what he did, the moment he came, he started meeting from March 1947, and within initial 40 days, he had 133 rounds of talk with the people. जल्दी जल्दी बताओ क्या चाहिए, किसको क्या चाहिए, अभी जल्दी जल्दी फिनिश करते हैं, फाइनल करते हैं, what to do, what not to do. As all of you can understand, a person from the Navy background or military background is going to have a no nonsense kind of attitude. Okay, जल्दी जल्दी बताओ किसको क्या चाहिए. So this was done by Mountbatten. Very firm he was. Okay, different kind of arrangement were discussed by them, and finally on 3rd of June, India and Pakistan, their areas were completely separated. Okay, कौन कौन सा किसको जाने वाला है. A delimitation commission was created by Mountbatten under Radcliffe, which eventually came to known as the Radcliffe line. And this partition, the bill was passed by the British Parliament by 18th of July, and by 15th of August, India and Pakistan were separated. So the whole story of modern India has various facets, starting from the coming of the European companies, fight between them, okay, then the fight between the British and the Indian states. There are various categories of policies we have to study: economic policy, education policy, all those policies. Then starting from 1858, we see the reversal of those policies because the direct crown rule was going to start. Then slowly we have to understand all the constitutional history. Along with that, from 85 onward, the active politics phase of the Indian people, that also had various diversity: moderate, extremist, revolutionaries. Along with this, some of the area I have skipped, like the rise of the socialist, communist, all those. Okay, and then along with this, we'll also study the contribution of the peasant class, tribal class, role played by women. Okay, all these areas we have to understand one by one, but this will only be possible once we have started evaluating all the events. Okay, from 1947 onwards, as all of you know, Jawaharlal Nehru became the Prime Minister, and this was the time to rebuild the nation because a lot of challenges were there. All of you know that refugee problem started on 15th of August. Nobody knew if they are in the area of India or Pakistan because the award of the Radcliffe, the commission, it came after independence. बाद में बताया उन्होंने, नहीं नहीं आप तो पाकिस्तान में हो. Okay, why was this done? Because they did not want to take responsibility for the massacre which were going to happen later on. All of you must have heard about the remake of the Gadar, है ना, part 2 कुछ आने वाला है. Gadar is a movie which provides some information about, in a dramatic sense, of the partition and the trains which were coming from Lahore to India or from India towards Lahore, the large scale butchering of people. Refugee problem, Hindus now started coming towards India. Some of those who wanted to become part of the Pakistan, those Muslims went to Pakistan. Refugee problem. Along with that, India was not sustainable state at that point of time. We were not having enough production to feed our own population. You must have heard this phrase, nation with a begging bowl. ठीक है ना, भिखारी है ना, हाथ में क्या लेके घूम रहे हैं, कटोरा लेके घूम रहे हैं. Why? Because India was always asking the foreign powers, like we asked USA to provide us grains. The issues of famines which had been created by the British administration had continued. They couldn't be stopped definitively until something new could be done in realms of technology. Starting from 1947, the basic topics आपके सारे mention किए हुए हैं. We'll understand the creation of the constitution, the work of the Constituent Assembly. Okay. Thereafter, we'll try to understand the role played by Nehru, his foreign policy, neighbors like China, Pakistan. Mostly these are the two most important ones. We'll also understand his tribal policy known as tribal punch sheet. We'll also understand with respect to Nehru what were the positives and the negatives of his personality. Like he was a very idealist person, believed China without thinking that a danger is going to come from that area itself. Okay, he wanted to become a powerful world leader, but eventually didn't do much for India's defense. That remained a problem. In 1962, like India was defeated by the Chinese. Okay, so we'll discuss a lot of those policies, plus the manner in which the India's map was created. Okay, the integration of various princely states. Then since these states were merged with one or the other state without considering क्या उनमें common है या क्या नहीं है, we had to go for state reorganization. So that commission of Fazal Ali, will understand about that also. Then we'll discuss the official language issue. Okay, that official language, as all of you know, that Hindi was the one which was selected by the constitution, and English was only for how many years? 15 years. But from 1963 onwards, the protest started in South India that you should not take away the English. So that official language issue is also we are going to discuss later on. Land reforms. Land reforms were an important part of the independent India. Why? Because British had created such a situation where we had large number of landless laborers, while on the other hand landlords were having acres of land. So zamindari was to be abolished, land ceiling was to be brought in, plus tenancy reforms were to be done, which eventually helped us in the creation of the Green Revolution by 1966-67 and changed the picture of India in the world politics. Now we were going to become self-sustainable in terms of food. We will discuss about that also. We will discuss the science and technology policy, how we will see the creation of the IITs, the creation of the esteemed institutions for physics, chemistry, all those fundamentals, okay, including the civil nuclear policies. All of this is going to be studied in this phase from 47 to 64. Plus, we have to also understand that even though the economic development began, it didn't come out to be even. Some areas are more developed today and some are less developed. This eventually created the issue of the regionalism. Okay, so the issue, that topic also वो भी पढ़ेंगे. The issue of communalism, how it was eventually addressed by the infant Indian state, कैसे उन्होंने उसको tackle किया. So these are certain topics, including Dalit movements, including the environmental movements like the famous Chipko movement. In India, the environmental movements are a bit different from the other developed states. There, the NGOs are very vocal about it. In India, initially, the more vocal were the people from lower strata, whose economic means were getting affected by these large-scale projects. So these are the areas which we'll discuss in the post-independence phase. Okay, so सबसे ज़्यादा जो wide syllabus है in our optional. It is of modern India, but as all of you know, modern India is having a lot of footprint in this exam. In prelims, usually 7 to 8 questions they come from modern India. Even in mains, GS paper 1, 50 marks they will come from modern India. Plus, even in our optional, $150 marks, तो फिर आपको चूज करना है कितना आप करना चाहते हो. And finally, if we see even in terms of interview or the personality test, many questions will be asked to you from modern India. This is the favorite topic of the panelist because this is read by everyone. All the panelists may not know about ancient or medieval very well, but this everybody knows in India. So that's why the impact of modern India on your selection is very high. और इसलिए सबसे ज़्यादा सिलेबस में वाइड भी यही दिया हुआ है. इवन योर पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस वो भी आपके मेंस में है, बट अ क्वेश्चन डजंट कम एवरी ईयर. मैनी ऑफ द फाउंडेशन ऑफ सब्जेक्ट्स, जैसे कि लैंड रिफॉर्म आपका जो हम पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस में कवर करते हैं, दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ योर GS3 सिलेबस ऑल्सो. योर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल हिस्ट्री ऑफ पेपर 2, दैट इज ऑल्सो पार्ट ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया. तो कई बार क्वेश्चन आता है ना कि डू यू थिंक दैट द एक्ट ऑफ 1935 इंट्रोड्यूस फेडरल गवर्नमेंट इन इंडिया, तो वो हम वैसे हिस्ट्री में पढ़ लेते हैं. So in the first class itself I told all of you history is all about summation of all the subjects. तो वो आपको कहीं ना कहीं हेल्प करने ही वाला है modern India. Many examples of India's achievements, they can be used in case studies here and there in your essays also, that comes from modern India. So very detailed is something which you need to understand, plus the impact is also there. तो पूरा आपको करना पड़ेगा. All right. So this is all we need to study. Let us just see the concept list. Shantanu, I did not set British agent Gandhiji. Okay, he was supporting them initially, but later on he himself changed. So that we have to understand that has always been transition. We cannot say a person from the beginning is going to be anti-British. Gandhiji, if you see his career, where did he studied? कहाँ किया था उन्होंने graduation? It was in England. Served in South Africa. There also he had the British in their war effort. Came back to India. So Gandhiji का बहुत criticism चलता है इन चीजों में. British used to say that he is the British policeman. कि एक बार stop बोलेगा and the whole India will stop. So if you see from different perspective, different kinds of statements can be made. Kindly see the periodization. These are the broad things which we have to understand. Arrival of Europeans, 18th century, transition, rise of nationalism, moderate, extremist, Gandhi, and post-independence. All of this I have made clear in the last two classes. Divide and rule. This has been the favorite policy of British. Divide people on the basis of their religion. Divide them on the basis of their communities, like the scheduled caste versus the upper caste. So this has been the main policy of the British. Subsidiary alliance, we had discussed that there were certain provisions which to be accepted by a state, and that's how the British increased their supremacy. Doctrine of lapse means if you do not have a natural heir, your state would be confiscated by the British. Okay. Next, land revenue policy we had already discussed. Education, downward filtration theory. When we talk about education, for the first time, the Act of 1813, it gave a budget of 1 lakh. Okay, like Indians को पढ़ा दो 1 लाख रुपए में. You understand 1 लाख में कुछ नहीं होता नहीं है. So this was the intention behind it. But even on this, the British were able to create a controversy कि 1 लाख में पढ़ाएंगे क्या क्या. ठीक है, तो कमिटी के ऊपर ज्यादा खर्चा कर दिया rather than on education itself. So there were two perspectives. Somebody says that Indians should be taught Western subjects and that too in English language. These people are known as Anglicists. Those who said that Indians should be taught their own past, their own literature and that too in vernacular language, they are known as Orientalists. So this fight started from 1813 onwards, okay, and eventually this was solved by 1835. The decision was taken by Lord William Bentinck on the basis of the report given by Macaulay. Macaulay was a defining person and he was a supporter of Anglicists. And you must have heard this defining line, okay, that we want to create a class of Indian citizens who are European in taste, intellect, morals and only Indians in blood and color. कि बस इसमें इंडियन हो, बाकी सारी चीजें क्या बन जाए, यूरोपियन. So this was the education policy. Plus, if they are going to provide a budget of 1 lakh rupees, naturally you cannot teach a lot of people in India having such a large population. So what happened? They said we'll focus only on urban areas, and the people who are going to learn in these areas will be responsible for taking learning to rural areas. So this theory is known as downward filtration theory. कि हम 4 लोगों को पढ़ाएंगे and these 4 people will be responsible for teaching the next 40. वो आगे देखते रहना अपना. See as per your own requirement. So state was not taking the responsibility and this is known as downward filtration theory. And this was finally changed by Wood's dispatch, okay, who came during the time of the Dalhousie, 1854. Then policy of ring fence. When British had only control largely over Bengal, what they did, they made it a conscious policy not to fight with their neighbors, like their neighbor was Awadh. So what they try to do, have good relations with them by signing the subsidiary alliance, so that if they have to fight a battle, they can fight in the friend's area rather than in their own area. This is known as policy of ring fence, where they were trying to make a kind of shelter in and around themselves. Direct fight हमारे साथ नहीं होनी चाहिए कभी भी. This we'll understand in detail later on, because they tried to create such territory in every part of India. Like South में उन्होंने Travancore बनाने की कोशिश किया for the same, that policy of ring fence. Subordinate isolation means the policy towards the state from 1773 till 1858, where they were trying to isolate them and annex them one after the other. This is known as subordinate isolation. After 1858, they said we are not going to annex any more state. This is known as subordinate union. From 1935, they tried to create a federation of British India and the princely state. This is the last stage जो आपके दिया हुआ, policy of equal federation. ठीक है, तो ये stages हैं of the British, 3 stages, 35 से 47. Then policy of masterly inactivity. So this was the policy of John Lawrence. ठीक है, they had already been defeated by the Afghanis from 1838 to 1842 in the first Afghan war. So he came in 1860. So he said, I'm not going to indulge too much in Afghanistan. जो वहाँ पे होगा देख लेंगे. The only thing we care about it that Russian influence should not increase. So direct उसके अंदर जो act नहीं किया, that is known as policy of masterly inactivity. No direct engagement in Afghanistan. This was reversed by Lord Lytton, who fought the war from 1876 to 78. The second Anglo-Afghanistan war. Separate elected, all of you understand now. Federalism, dual type of government, center and state. ठीक है. Then we have the bicameralism, means we have 2 houses, Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Carnatic wars, all of you understand. Plassey, Buxar, Anglo-Maratha, ये हमने already सारा discuss कर लिया. Political concept, despotism means all the powers of executive, legislature and judiciary, they are merged in one entity, that is known as despotism. Diarchy means 2 level. Diarchy is majorly famous for the Act of 1919. The Act of 1919 separated the subjects for state and center. Like right now also we have center list and state list, okay? And the state list was further divided into 2 parts. reserved and transferred. Transferred included those subjects which were given to Indian ministers. Reserved were under the control of the governor of the state, and this is known as diarchy. Double government कई बार यूज होगा, जैसे 1765 to 72. ओके, ओरिएंटलिज्म मैंने आपको समझा दिया. दिस इज व्हाट ओरिएंटलिज्म इज ऑल अबाउट, where they wanted to pursue the study of Indian subject, that too in vernacular language. Principle of paramountcy, increasing their say over each and everything in India, where nobody can question them. This is known as paramountcy. Safety valve theory is the theory which was initially brought in to explain the origin of Congress. As all of you know, Congress was founded by A.O. Hume. His biography was written by one person known as William Wedderburn. So William Wedderburn published this autobiography in 1912-13, and in this he has written that A.O. Hume started the Congress because he did not want to have a revolt like 1857. It means Congress was founded to preserve the British Empire rather than to fight against it, and this is known as safety valve theory. We'll discuss this debate in detail later on. Right now we do not accept this theory. ठीक है? Moderate extremist, satyagrah, ahimsa, this is all easy. There is a difference between communism and communalism. ठीक है? Communalism is all about giving more weightage to your religion in the politics, while communism is all about the working on the theory of Karl Marx. ठीक है? Dictatorship of the proletariat. Then the economic concept, utilitarianism. Utilitarianism means maximum happiness for the maximum number of people. This is what it is all about. ठीक है? Utilitarian. This is one of the philosophy which is used for taking decisions. Like many of time you must have heard that government is evacuating some area, okay, because natural resources are there, like the tribal areas. For what purpose? For development, for seeing the maximum happiness, maximum comfort of the people of India. उस एक एरिया को उन्होंने ले लिया, ठीक है, और उनको किसी और जगह पे ट्रांसफर कर दिया. दिस इज ऑन द बेस ऑफ द फिलॉसफी ऑफ यूटिलिटेरियन. फ्री ट्रेडर्स और द वन वे फ्री ट्रेड विच वी हैव जस्ट डिस्कस्ड. ठीक है. ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ. मर्केंटिलिज्म मैंने आपको समझा दिया. मर्केंटिलिज्म इज यूज ऑफ पॉलिटिकल पावर फॉर बेंडिंग द ट्रेड रूल फॉर द accumulation ऑफ कैपिटल. Then these important movements we have discussed, majority of them. Savdeshi started against the partition of Bengal. Home rule for teaching the people of India about the Swaraj. Champaran with respect to the problem faced by the peasants of the Bihar. Ahmedabad, it was mostly about what? The plague bonus was given by the industrialists to the workers, and now they were asking that since the plague is gone, we should take away this bonus. But these workers were saying now the price rise has increased. So that's why it was known as the Ahmedabad mill strike. Kheda Satyagrah, again, and famine has already come in that area along with drought, etc. And that's why, as per the revenue code, the tax was not to be taken by the government. तो उसके लिए खेड़ा सत्याग्रह. Rowlatt, etc. we have already discussed. INA revolt. This was, as all of you know, that Subhash Chandra Bose, he had certain different idea from Gandhiji. So starting from 1940, he created forward bloc. Later on, he was the one who started handling the Indian National Army, and they again came for the campaign, which eventually failed, at the Imphal campaign. So all these soldiers who were in Southeast Asia, they were grouped in this INA, and when they failed, they were brought in as prisoners of war by the British. The trial started in the Red Fort, and eventually the British had to leave them. ठीक है. So this is known as INA revolt. Subaltern. Subaltern का meaning क्या होता है? We see from the perspective of those people who are not represented in the history. Like majority of the time, whenever we talk about modern India, we say Gandhi ji, Gandhi ji. So maximum कहाँ चला गया सारा श्रेय, कहाँ चला जाता है पूरे मूवमेंट का? Towards Gandhiji, and that is not reality. Who are the maximum number of people? The peasant, tribals, women, these people. ठीक है. वो सब आते हैं subaltern approach के अंदर. And when we try to understand them, this is known as subaltern history. Depressed classes, working classes, nationalism. So these are the various concepts which we were required to discuss. Okay. So that's all we wanted to discuss today. All right. Tomorrow we'll start with world history. World history का basic कल और परसों finish कर देंगे. On Thursday we are going to wind up this concept session. ठीक है. उसके बाद फिर हम आगे अपनी classes को forward करेंगे. The important thing for all of you is इसको revise करो एक बार अच्छे से. ठीक है. Basic terms को समझो. When you will be able to do so, the manner in which you can score marks more than others, it's always going to be there. जब हर छोटे छोटे कंसेप्ट को आप जानते होगे ना, यू कैन राइट बेटर इंट्रोडक्शंस, यू कैन राइट बेटर कंक्लूजन, यू कैन इजीली कनेक्ट वेरियस इवेंट्स इन हिस्ट्री. एंड दिस इज द पर्पस ऑफ दीज क्लासेस, मेकिंग यू अवेयर ऑफ दीज इवेंट्स सो दैट व्हेन वी स्टार्ट विद द कोर क्लासेस ऑल ऑफ यू विल बी कंप्लीटली फोकस्ड. इट विल नॉट बी कि पता ही नहीं है ये कौन है, ये क्या है. तो फ्रिक्शन जो होता है ना इनिशियल व्हेनेवर वी स्टडी समथिंग, दैट इज गोइंग टू बी नेगेटेड बाय दीज concept classes. ठीक है. So that's it for today. Online students also, that's it for today. Okay, we'll meet tomorrow and we'll start discussing world history, the basics of that.